When people describe a horror game as disturbing, they often default to a vocabulary of immediacy, graphic violence, grotesque creature design, taboo imagery, or shocking narrative twists designed to provoke revulsion on contact. Disturbance in this popular understanding is something explosive and external, something that attacks the senses first and the psyche second. The rule of rose does not function within that framework. It does not overwhelm through spectacle, nor does it relentlessly chase the player with overt adrenalized terror in the way Silent Hill 2 builds upon dread through psychological confrontation, or how Haunting Ground sustains panic through predatory pursuit. Instead, Rule of Rose embeds its horror in something slower, heavier, and far more intimate. It does not erupt into your awareness, it seeps into it. The game unsettles not by forcing you to recoil, but by compelling you to remember, to revisit emotional states many would rather leave unexamined. Its horror accumulates through tone, implication, and thematic repetition, gradually constructing an atmosphere that feels less like fear of the unknown and more like dread of the deeply familiar. Released exclusively for the PlayStation 2 20 years ago, Rule of Rose arrived burdened by controversy that often overshadowed its actual content. Sensationalized rumors circulated about its themes before many players even had access to play it, generating a moral panic that fixated on surface-level assumptions rather than engaging with its emotional architecture. Yet the game's true disturbance lies not in its exploitative imagery, but in its willingness to interrogate the fragility of childhood. Set in 1930s England and following a young woman named Jennifer through fragmented memories of an orphanage dominated by the red Crayon Aristocrats, the premise sounds almost like a dark fairy tale kind of story, but what transforms it from gothic curiosity into something deeply unsettling is its inversion of innocence. Children, culturally framed as embodiments of vulnerability and purity, are repositioned here as enforcers of societal hierarchy, arbiters of humiliation, and architects of psychological cruelty. The horror is not something that is unnatural and has invaded childhood. It is that childhood itself becomes the source of domination and exclusion. Where many horror titles externalize evil into monsters, curses, or cosmic forces beyond our understanding, Rule of Rose internalizes it into social dynamics. The most suffocating moments are not boss encounters or jump scares, they are ceremonies of judgment, shifting alliances, and arbitrary punishments delivered by children who wield power without emotional maturity. The game reconstructs the unstable logic of childhood structures, where belonging can evaporate overnight and affection is contingent upon compliance. It captures the terror of existing within a system whose rules are opaque yet absolute, where humiliation is ritualized and mercy is unpredictable. That experience is profoundly uncomfortable because it mirrors formative anxieties most people carry in fragments: the fear of exclusion, the confusion of being targeted without explanation, the desperate need to be accepted by those who may end up despising you. In translating those emotional memories into interactive form, the game weaponizes empathy itself. To argue that Rule of Rose is the most disturbing PS2 horror game is not to claim that it is the most technically refined, nor the most viscerally frightening in the moment-to-moment sense. In fact, its mechanical shortcomings are well documented, but disturbance is not synonymous with polish or intensity. It is measured by persistence. It is defined by the degree to which a work lingers in the psyche after the screen fades to black. Rule of Rose endures precisely because it avoids the catharsis typical kind of horror. It does not cleanse the tension with triumph. It does not provide clear moral resolution. Instead, it just leaves emotional residue, unresolved, melancholic, and invasive. Its horror is human, rooted in insecurity, jealousy, longing, and abandonment. And human horror, stripped of supernatural distance, is always the most difficult to dismiss. And if you like these sorts of video games or horror topics, then subscribe, because for the next month, that's exactly what I'll be doing. The central innovation of Rule of Rose lies in its decision to transform childhood social hierarchy into a gothic kind of institution. The red Crayon Aristocrats are not merely antagonists, they are a parody of adult systems of power refracted through the volatility of youth. They create titles, establish rituals, enforce punishments, and distribute status with theatrical solemnity. But beneath the veneer of order lies instability. Authority shifts abruptly. favor is conditional and transactional, loyalty is fragile. In this environment, Jennifer is not simply navigating a haunted orphanage, she is surviving an ecosystem of insecurity. The horror emerges from unpredictability. A child who shows affection in one moment may orchestrate humiliation in the next. The rules governing survival are social rather than physical, and social rules, especially in childhood, can be far more arbitrary than any monster's behavioral pattern. Childhood cruelty often lacks the overt brutality associated with adult violence. Instead, it manifests as exclusion, rumor, mockery, and the subtle erosion of belonging. Rule of Rose captures this with painful specificity. The punishments Jennifer has to endure are exaggerated into ceremonial absurdity, yet their emotional core is painfully recognizable. Being placed on trial by peers, judged for intangible offenses, forced to prove worthiness through degrading tasks. These experiences echo the psychological landscapes of schoolyards and playgrounds. The game suggests that children untethered from adult oversight and driven by insecurity can replicate the very hierarchies that oppress them. The horror does not arise from supernatural corruption, it arises from mimicry of adult power filtered through immaturity of age. What makes this dynamic especially disturbing is its emotional authenticity. Most players, whether consciously or not, carry memories of navigating social ecosystems during their childhood. Moments where alliances felt life-defining, where a shift in group dynamics could trigger intense shame and loneliness. Rule of Rose amplifies these memories into grotesque theatrics, but it does not distort their essence. The Red Crayon Aristocrats feel believable not because their rituals are realistic, but because their motivations are. They crave validation, they fear abandonment, they weaponize status to mask vulnerability. The game thus exposes a paradox. Innocence does not preclude cruelty, it often incubates it when insecurity is left unchecked. By centering its horror on systemic humiliation rather than physical threat, the game constructs a uniquely oppressive atmosphere because Jennifer's lack of agency is not merely a mechanical limitation, it is a thematic embodiment. She is evaluated constantly, repositioned within the hierarchy she cannot begin to dismantle. Her suffering is bureaucratized by children who do not fully comprehend the consequences of their own actions. This inversion of expected power dynamics destabilizes the cultural assumption that childhood is inherently safe. Once that assumption erodes, the orphanage becomes more than just a setting. It becomes a metaphor for any environment where belonging is conditional and authority is arbitrary. That recognition is deeply, uncomfortably human. If hierarchy forms the structural spine of Rule of Rose, emotional dependency forms the beating heart. The relationships between Jennifer and the other girls are charged with longing, resentment, jealousy, and fragile attachment. Affection is offered as currency and withdrawn as punishment. Love is conditional, tethered to obedience and loyalty. The game interrogates the terrifying possibility that the desire to be cherished can become a vulnerability easily exploited. In this environment, attachment is not a sanctuary, it is a leverage point. The fear of losing connection becomes much more frightening than any monster encounter because it threatens identity itself. The specter of abandonment permeates the narrative. Characters cling to one another not out of secure affection, but out of desperation to avoid isolation. That desperation mutates into possessiveness, manipulation, and betrayal. Jennifer's journey through the orphanage is therefore not simply spatial exploration, it is emotional negotiation. Each interaction carries the weight of potential rejection. The game captures the anxiety of wondering whether affection is genuine or strategic, whether kindness will persist or evaporate entirely. These fears are universal, because they are rooted in formative experiences where acceptance felt conditional. By forcing the player to inhabit that uncertainty, Rule of Rose transforms emotional vulnerability into sustained horror. Narratively, the game deepens this discomfort through fragmentation and ambiguity. Much of what unfolds feels filtered through memory. Distorted, symbolic, incomplete. The structure denies the player stable footing. You are not given a clear, authoritative account of events. Instead, you piece together trauma through implication. That interpretive engagement intensifies The disturbance because it implicates you in reconstruction. You are not passively consuming tragedy, you are just assembling it. And as the pieces coalesce, the horror becomes less about external threat and more about the cumulative weight of emotional neglect and insecurity. Rule of Rose resists offering cathartic release. There is no triumphant restoration of innocence, no definitive moral cleansing. Even revelations feel tinged with melancholy rather than relief. Even revelations feel tinged with melancholy rather than relief. The game acknowledges that childhood wounds rarely resolve cleanly. They linger, shaping perception long after the original environment has vanished. By denying closure, it denies comfort. The player exists not exhilarated but contemplative, carrying unresolved emotional tension. That refusal to provide narrative reassurance is precisely what cements its status as so deeply disturbing. Mechanically, Rule of Rose has often been criticized for its cumbersome combat and deliberate pacing. Yet, these very qualities contribute to its oppressive tone. Jennifer does not move with empowering fluidity. She feels fragile, hesitant, frequently overwhelmed because combat lacks elegance. It emphasizes vulnerability over mastery. Rather than undermining horror, this friction reinforces it. You never feel dominant because every confrontation feels slightly unwieldy and slightly exhausting. The mechanical discomfort mirrors Jennifer's emotional powerlessness, aligning player experience with thematic intent. The orphanage itself functions less as a maze of danger and more as a mausoleum of memory. Its corridors are dim, its palette muted, its architecture decaying, yet strangely intimate. The environment does not scream, it sighs. Sound design leans heavily into somber orchestration, imbuing exploration with mournful resonance rather than anticipatory shock. This tonal consistency transforms the space into a psychological echo chamber. Even moments of relative calm feel saturated with unresolved tension, as though the walls themselves are steeped in humiliation and longing. Enemy design further destabilizes the boundary between literal and metaphorical horror. Many adversaries appear less like biological threats and more like manifestations of distorted emotion. Jealousy given form, fear embodied, resentment grotesquely exaggerated. This abstraction resists simple categorization. You are not merely eliminating obstacles, you are confronting symbolic distortions of human feeling. That layering intensifies unease, because it suggests that the true origin of horror lies with relational dynamics rather than just simple external monstrosity. Unlike so many other PS2 horror titles I have covered on this channel that rely on cyclical tension and release, Rule of Rose sustains an almost unbroken melancholy. Relief, when it comes, is muted. Victory feels hollow. The emotional atmosphere remains heavy, pressing against the player with quiet persistence. This sustained weight generates psychological fatigue, and fatigue in horror can be more destabilizing than shock. It erodes resilience gradually, leaving the player emotionally raw rather than adrenaline charged. That lingering exhaustion is not a byproduct, it is the design. To designate Rule of Rose as the most disturbing PS2 horror game is to recognize that disturbance operates on a spectrum distinct from fear. Fear spikes and subdues, disturbance embeds and endures. While other titles may deliver sharper frights or more polished mechanics, Rule of Rose achieves something rarer. It destabilizes assumptions about innocence, belonging, and emotional safety. It interrogates childhood not as a sanctuary, but as a crucible where insecurity can harden into cruelty. Its horror is not theatrical, it is introspective. It confronts players with uncomfortable emotional truths. That jealousy can masquerade as affection. That hierarchy can emerge wherever insecurity thrives. That abandonment leaves impressions long after physical spaces are left behind. These themes resonate because they are rooted in lived experiences. Because the game does not rely on distance created by supernatural spectacle, it collapses that distance, forcing recognition. What lingers after completion is not the memory of a specific monster encounter, but the sensation of standing within a system where worth is conditional and mercy is uncertain. that emotional memory is deeply personal and therefore deeply unsettling. The orphanage may fade, but the feelings will remain fragile, unresolved, and echoing. In the end, the most disturbing horror is not the grotesque creature lurking in shadows. It is the recollection of vulnerability within social structures we once inhabited. The realization that cruelty can flourish in spaces presumed safe because Rule of Rose understands this with unnerving clarity. And because it understands it, it lingers, quiet, melancholic, and impossible to fully shake off.